We are a kind of a pivotal hub for gaming in the Polkadot ecosystem, and we extend into all things media and entertainment. And I'm really excited today because I have the opportunity to moderate this panel of esteemed panelists, and I'm going to start with Marc at the end and have each of you introduce yourself and give your lens on Web3 gaming.
Cool, yeah, so I'm Marc McGinley. I've been a game designer for about 15 years. Started out indie, mobile, free-to-play, moved into AAA, so I was at Ubisoft for 5 years. Went to work on Star Wars, and then an opportunity came up at Animoca brands, and so I did Star Wars, and I was like, screw Star Wars, Web3 gaming is inevitable. Yeah.
Screw Star Wars?
Yeah, exactly, I did. Yeah. So I mean, I saw an opportunity there where, I've been through the free-to-play phase, where everyone had their head in the sand. It was like, oh, you're extractionary. This is bad for gaming. You shouldn't be doing this. And for me, it was a sign that if that's what people are saying about Web3, it must be the future. So that's my transition into Web3.
Hello everyone, my name is Cathleen. I lead ecosystems at B3. This is technically our first year of a GDC debut, so I'm going to give you guys a little bit of context what B3 is. We're a game chain built on Base. So if you think about kind of like this ecosystem's narrative, like Solana, Base, high liquidity, we're essentially the gaming layer, also an infrastructure player. So we currently have 6 game chains that are signed, Parallel, Infinigods, pretty much all the biggest titles, as well as Super Gaming from India, 3 more exciting ones to be announced. And we also have B3, which powers a lot of the hyper-casual games at the moment. If you type basement.fun on your phone, you can immediately play roughly about like 90 of these mini clip titles. We also have the open ecosystem infrastructure powered for any game to build, to launch assets on chain, and we'll have all the ecosystem tooling, making it easy for users to enjoy this kind of fun gameplay.
Hey everyone, my name's Michael. I'm one of the co-founders at Ssequence, and we are an all-in-one development platform for chains, games, and apps. So we help game developers with a full stack platform, everything from wallets and payments, marketplaces, transactions, NFTs and collectibles, analytics, to build and scale their Web3 games and experiences. And then we also provide that infrastructure to blockchains so that they can enable their ecosystems and create thriving worlds of developers, content, users, and liquidity.
And I have to ask about Wolves Den. Would you mind telling the
audience? We're one of the sponsors of Wolves Den, which is a collaboration of a bunch of the leading Web3 gaming KOLs and influencers, and it's run by Wolves DAO, and Wolves Den is a week-long event that's hosted at GDC. It's kind of like a hacker house, and they're hosting, I think, around 22 to 25 different events, gaming demos, meetups, play tests, a lot of awesome things happening over there, so I encourage you to check that space out as well.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a question about the relevance of blockchain gaming, because it sounds like we've all been in the space for quite some time, and you left, over a decade in traditional games for this space, and yet we've had this wave of, Bitcoin. It's like everybody on the street was asking me about Bitcoin, through the first wave, and then the second wave was AI agents, or maybe they were reverse, whatever. It was a very kind of loud moment. And then the third loud moment was, of course, meme coins. And we just haven't really heard the blockchain gaming wave yet, or mantra. And I'm wondering, what is the catalyst to bring it back?
Is that one for me first?
Yeah.
I think the obvious answer is a big game, right? We need a big catalyst game. I think we haven't had, as an industry, we haven't had our iPod moment yet, right? So I think some people are giving up on Web3 gaming and saying it's dead. But on the other hand, it's like gaming is a hit-driven business. Most games fail. That's the reality. So we just need to keep trying. If we give up too soon, we'll never get there. So big game if GTA were to launch this year with the token, for sure, it's happened. I'm not saying they are launching this year or with the token, even though they've said they're launching this year. But yeah, I think that catalyst is inevitable. I think this year is going to be big for gaming. I think the market right now is not in a great position for gaming. I think there's other things driving attention in the market. But for sure, I think we believe in gaming, so it's going to be there.
I echo that sentiment. I think we have to tackle it from both fronts, right? So on a content play, definitely waiting for like an innovative title where blockchain is not just a payment infrastructure, but it adds to the gameplay. So part of what we're scouting for on some of the studios that we're betting on is how do you build this game economy where the more you grind, the assets would lead to better gameplay, more exclusivity, and then also not really falling back to like 2021 meta of selling land for thousands of dollars when no one really building on it. How do you build it into your economy in a way where it's like the utility and it just stimulates the users to use that plot of land to do something. So no longer selling houses, maybe selling shops that gets renewed every couple months. There's a good amount of game developers that are thinking in this innovative forefront. But in addition to content, I also think us as an industry overall need to better collaborate together. So pretty much like the title of this panel, how do we, whether it's game chains, whether it's infrastructure partners, acknowledge that the biggest problem right now is finding actual gamers. Like on a good day, I'm estimating maybe like 30,000 Web3 gamers. On a bad day, maybe like even less than that. And then at this point is, how do we remove some of the friction, right? Like talking about specifically wallet onboarding, not having to force studios to use your auth system, not having to force studios to launch every single asset on your chain. Let blockchain what it does best, which is like open collaboration, interoperability. So a lot of the core thesis about how we think about gaming at B3 is going back to we let the game studios do what they do best and we power the infrastructure to allow them to utilize all the tools that blockchain has to offer.
Can I just ask one follow-up really quick before we go? Are we at that moment of prime time though, where you can say to a game developer, okay, here's how you do it. And they don't really have to think about it, all they have to do is develop the game? Or are we still in that kind of interim phase?
I am usually a little bit more of a cautious optimist. I think we're not there yet. It's not at the tipping point yet. I think at the moment, just based off of our working relationship with a lot of these game chains, which are pretty established studios like Parallel and Finnegods, they already have a title, they have live games. We're still kind of working through, okay, how do we remove more friction? Like from a user's perspective, you're making microtransactions, spending $5 in a game, and you have to go through the entire flow of KYC to onboard a token, to mint the asset, and you gotta wait a couple seconds, if not a couple minutes. These are all friction points that we need to remove before we slap millions of dollars to do like actual UA.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's content is king, and if we create great games, we can expand beyond the 30,000 Web3 gamers and welcome the 3 billion Web2 gamers into our Web3 experiences. And we may not even market them as such. They may not be marketed as a Web3 game. It might just be you're playing a wonderful experience and then you earn a reward that's on-chain that you're able to trade, and you realize now you're onboarded to this next generation of gaming. I think from the infrastructure side of things, like most problems are solved. There's obviously a lot of room to grow. Like Kathleen mentions UA, I think that's like a new frontier, and I think Web3 can unlock unprecedented forms of user acquisition, but it's not perfectly dialed in yet. But yeah, I think this year we'll probably see, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 really successful Web3 games, and then next year we'll see like 6 or 8, and then the year after that it'll be like 10 to 20, and then the floodgates will open because there will be examples, there will be successful case studies. And to your point, Angela, of whether people will need to think about it, I don't think they'll need to think about the tooling, but they'll need to think about the game design and the economy, because, you know, like copycats can only go so far, right? So you still need to be innovative if you're a game designer, regardless of whether the technology component is solved.
I mean, that's kind of being a game designer, just as you
Exactly.
just said.
Yeah.
So that's promising. I mean, when you mentioned UA, I would like to dive into that because that's a topic that hasn't been explored a ton. I think it'd be interesting for the audience. I was also speaking to Tim Tello, who I think is speaking next about this idea that Web3 could be very well suited, perfectly suited actually, for kind of the next generation of UA. Would you want to start, Michael, and comment on that?
Sure. So there are a couple of very interesting features about Web3 that lends itself incredibly well to UA. One is about being able to see what's inside of a wallet and understanding a user's profile and behavior based on the assets they own. So if you see someone owns a particular collection of NFTs or game items or tokens, you may want to offer a personalized incentive to that user that then welcomes them into your game, whether it's a progression reward or some collectible, some cosmetic, to entice them to enter your game. And that's very precise targeting. Which is really special. And then just this notion of on-chain incentives and rewards is fodder for deeper, more long-term engagement. Because if you can invite somebody in, if you could incentivize them to spend and they already feel a sense of ownership over something that is tradable, that tends to foster longer-term engagement. And for example, if you were to reward somebody a token, and they then spent an amount of that token in your game, you have overcome one of the biggest hurdles when it comes to monetizing players by enabling someone to make their very first purchase. That's the hardest purchase to enable in gaming. I think a lot of us in the room will know that in traditional games, only about 5% of players spend. In Web3, we see a higher percentage. Of course, there's a lower absolute number, but if you can encourage someone to spend that first time, then they will continue to spend more likely. Yeah, I think this notion of on-chain rewards, collectibles, tokens, et cetera, is very powerful UA mechanisms.
Adding to that a little bit, even if we extrapolate outside of gaming, right? If you think about what other entertainment Web3 has kind of had its headway in, if you look at music, a lot of these music artists also see the value of having NFTs because at this point, they can connect with their true fans earlier on, monetize a little bit to a point where they don't have to sell their IP to these massive publishing companies. So to them, it's more of like a sustainable way of monetizing to grow their own IP, to grow their own brand to a way. And I think this is what a lot of game studios could also mirror and do.
I was going to ask Marc, because given your traditional background, it would be interesting to dig into any kind of maybe unappreciated angles or mechanics or tactics with UA that you've seen.
Absolutely. I mean, I just want to emphasize the token aspects a little bit more. I mean, as a game designer, my inherent want is to make games as seamless and as great user experience as possible, which means, if a game doesn't need a token, don't put a token in a game, right? Like, users shouldn't know about blockchain. All of these principles are very intuitive and they seem logical. But at the same time, sometimes there's a really good reason why they don't actually make sense. And so for us, a lot of the time, we're actually advising teams that they should put a token in a game. And sometimes, it's counter. Like the market right now is, as the crypto Twitter sentiment right now is that tokens in games don't work. Tokens always go down. Why would you put a token in a game? But the fact is, we see tokens as interoperability. They literally connect one game to another game and one user to another user. So we see tokens as a highway, basically, a UA highway, and play to airdrop is one method of engaging and incentivizing users to come in. But it's really important that your users who found the network have a stake in the network and they're earning part of the network and their value can interoperate between networks. Like that, for me, is the fundamental part of Web3. And if we miss that part of Web3, we miss Web3. Like that's ignoring what Web3 brings.
I love this idea of the highway, the UA highway, because I'm constantly battling in my head this idea that there's a natural tendency toward community in Web3. There's a need for community in gaming, and yet people come and go in Web3 games. It's hard to keep that kind of engagement per game, but maybe it is. Do you think this is because people come and go because they're going to other games? Is the community really a group of games? How do you guys think about community?
I think there is a new opportunity for IPs to collaborate in Web3. Just as like one of the offerings part of Ssequence is this ecosystem wallet that can federate multiple games and IP and while being embedded. So it feels like an embedded wallet. and it's like super easy sign-on, but it's federated across all games or applications within an ecosystem. And I think this lends itself really well to interesting collaborations between different game developers. For example, game A, if you have a reward in it, it offers you a progression advancement or a cosmetic in game B, and vice versa. And so you can start to have games forming communities together. I think that's probably part of what B3 is aiming to do with your gaming layer, in that, yeah, there's this potential interoperability of assets and items across worlds. And I think that's very interesting because as a player then, your spending power, all of your items are accessible in one location, and it lends itself to like persistent player profiles and the ability to bring your achievements from one world into the next. And that means, like, again, if I've earned a whole bunch of rewards in game A, game B has an opportunity to reward me for that and provide me with some really compelling experience that could also then add utility and value back to game A, because it's like, oh, like I won all that stuff in game A, so I want to keep doing that. It actually incentivizes me to participate in both games. And obviously you can extrapolate that to many more. So I think community is evolving, and yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out.
I love the fact that we're all nodding at the same time, like we've been thinking about this. Kind of a similar idea. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I didn't have a mic, I would be like cheering you on because we're 100% aligned. And I feel like ecosystem wallet is like a core part of that user experience for you to see across the board who this user is. So at B3, I think when we think about interoperability, it's not only for assets, but more of like attention span. So for a lot of people that are looking into, okay, what Web3 games are out there, you gotta dig through Twitter, you gotta see if it's listed on Steam or listed on usually Epic or iOS. And then by the time you download the game, it's likely that you also forgot about it. So at this point, we're thinking about it, okay, how can we aggregate the attention span of the community that we spend so much time bringing in? So we built Basement as a game launcher. So now you can log on to Basement, you can play these games, earn the rewards, and then it will tie into a token, which lives in your ecosystem wallet, which also in the future we're building an AnySpend as a product, which is essentially any chain, any token kind of swap mechanic. So you can pay for NFTs very seamlessly. And we also pioneered a shared incentive amongst all of our game chains to refer users. So this is pretty much like step one, right? Like say, imagine you're playing Sanctuary, the extraction shooter game by Parallel. In the alpha phase, maybe there's like 5 hours of content play. After that, you can hit the users of, let's refer you, try out this game called Indus by Super Gaming. If the user spends in the second game, the first studio technically gets a rev share. How do we build an incentive layer for studios to work together to tackle UA together, and an infrastructure for assets to be interoperable in-game? This is where you see a lot of the interesting kind of cross-IP pollinations that we've been talking about, but it's been so hard to materialize. So it's with this philosophy that we're building this entire community, as well as kind of like the gamer attention span hub base.
So we think a lot about reputation systems. So to Michael's point, reputation is hugely important. I think a lot of people thinking about interoperability between games, it's like you leave my game and go into a different game, you're extracting value from my game. But what that's actually doing is, if we establish a strong presence as a game, and that user leaves, they're taking their reputation with them to that other game, and that reputation is reflecting back to our game. It's serving as a kind of marketing tool for our game. Even though that user is no longer with us, the message of our game is still continuing with them, because they've got all the history, all the provenance that's permanently attached to the blockchain.
You just tapped into something that is so prevalent among traditional game people, which is this idea that, why would I ever do that? Why would I let you leave? You know, this doesn't make any sense. And what you said, Michael, is super interesting. The idea that once I do leave as a player, all these other games can incentivize me to come back. And yeah, this free flow is really interesting. It feels like we're going to have, so with Polkadot, we are developing something called the Experience Exchange. Now, it's not going to happen today. It's in the works, but it's kind of this rewards mechanism, starting with, you know, Mythical has NFL Rivals and FIFA, et cetera, and then if we all the other games in the ecosystem could kind of cross-pollinate with rewards. There could be something there. So it's really interesting. Can you guys each talk about what you're most excited about this year? It can be a game, it can be a game mechanic, a game loop, it can be really anything in the blockchain game ecosystem.
One thing that's really hard. I love this.
You can say two.
That's even harder. This convergence of like gaming and AI agents, right? Like I think we saw the social media AI agent thing. That's really cool. But like actually see Parallel is obviously a great example of like actually using AI agents in game, and if these agents have tokens or ways to interact with them economically in terms of reputation, like all of these things, it really creates new games, like games that are not possible without Web3. That's really exciting to me.
You gave me a great idea. I'm gonna ride along this train, also say the convergence between AI and gaming, both in a way where AI as a tool to develop games. We're seeing an influx of like one-man game studios where within 10 days someone was able to make $38,000 just by using AI tools to build a game. So because of that, we started a AI hackathon. So we're incentivizing, we're working with 4K, working with Third Web to kind of bring more of these. Let's say if you had a dream as a kid to build a game, now is your time because there's so many AI tools that you can utilize and actually achieve that. What we're really helping is like, how do you think about it from a monetization perspective? How do you do distribution? But next layer from that is how do we target the Web3 community? So as mentioned, Parallel is like at the forefront of this. They launched Wayfinder, which essentially is kind of like an agentic network where you as a user can utilize your own AI agent to do things on chain, whether that's like buying a token, swapping a token, staking your assets, and then you can also find profitable paths. So say if you find a profitable path to stake X token on Y chain, this path, whenever it's used by someone else, you get a revenue share. Cool. So it's with these kind of incentives and infrastructure in place that we'll see a lot more rich economies that are built, whether that's in the game itself or outside of it.
What's the name of that path? I think that's
Wayfinder.
Cool. Wayfinder. That's really cool.
Check it out.
I like that. Yeah, I'm just really excited for the content that will be released in the subsequent year to 3 years. We're currently powering around 100 games and apps, and I think 50 or more blockchains. And just some of the IP I've seen that's in development is astounding, from some of the most legendary game developers of all time to brand new startups who have never worked in the gaming industry before, who are looking at this space through fresh eyes. And I think we're gonna see some crazy shit, amazing, wonderful experiences happen. And just watching these ecosystems flourish and truly revolutionize not just gaming, but the internet. I'm so confident this is where we're headed, so I'm incredibly excited by it.
You said that was a little bit of a teaser. You have to go a little bit more, certain game, certain genre.
I mean, there's a lot of different genres. I've seen some really cool in the shooter space that are, and like I don't even play shooters, but when I see these games, I'm very excited by the mechanics.
Really good.
Yeah, and they're by people who know the space inside and out. I've also seen some incredible trading card games, which we have experience. We built a game called Skyweaver many years ago. And yeah, they're just like innovating on how you can do these things. And I would love to share more about the mechanics and their names, but both of these games I'm referring to off the top of my head are in stealth. Ubisoft's making a couple really cool games with us and potentially more. There's also, I mean, obviously, Cathleen and Marc mentioned AI and gaming. There's games leveraging AI in really cool ways. So yeah, it's a new frontier.
So I had a little test in this panel, which was that I wasn't going to mention AI to see what would come up. And it turns out that 2 out of 3 of you are most excited about AI.
Yeah.
I'll just add to that I think we are going to see a crisis of inauthenticity from AI, which is going to bring back blockchain and Web3 as a use case to kind of say, I could just hear some big game developer in some studio who you probably worked with 10 years ago who asks his team, isn't there some sort of tech we could use to make sure that these are real?
Yeah.
But anyway, do we have 1 more minute for just quick thoughts? Okay, just any final thoughts from the three of you, and we'll wrap up.
I'm just very excited by people who are building. So anyone in this room, if you are creating games or applications and you need a platform, like we're here to help at Ssequence. And if there's things that are missing on the platform that you have an idea for something or you're trying to achieve something and you don't know how to do it, or it seems like it's not possible with the stack, like please let us know, because we work for you. Our focus is on enabling our partners' success. So just tell us and we can probably build it for you.
Love taking ideas from the community as always. If you think there's any games that would be conducive to on-chain mechanics, we just announced the partnership with Atari last week.
Nice.
So if you're building a game, we'd love to talk to you. I am very opinionated, but at the same time, I love debates. So let's go through the intellectual process. Let's talk about anything you want to. Yeah, we're always here to help.
My final thought might be a bit controversial. It's don't listen to crypto Twitter. Don't let those messages seep in that Web3 gaming is dead. Keep building, keep trying new models. We haven't cracked it yet, and we like seeing new experiments. And it's only a matter of time until someone succeeds, and there's no reason it can't be a one-man team.
That's a great note to end on. Keep building. Thank you guys all so much, and thank you, BGA.
Thank you.